talking about primary and secondary sources. If you guys want to get out a sheet of paper and we're going to make a KWL chart for what we know about primary and secondary sources and what we want to learn about primary and secondary sources, and then obviously at the end we'll fill in what we have learned. So you guys can have a couple minutes to write down. So yesterday you guys got your research topics assigned, so you're going to begin collecting primary and secondary sources. So we're just going to go over what they are and how to tell the difference.
Let's say you have an assignment that requires both primary and secondary sources. How do you identify those, and where do you find them? Chances are that you're familiar with a variety of primary and secondary sources and use them in everyday life. However, locating primary sources about an academic topic can sometimes be difficult. So what are primary sources? Primary sources are first-hand accounts of an event and are created during the time that event took place. They can also be created retrospectively at a later date by a participant in those events. They are original documents and usually don't describe or analyze other documents. They can also be creative works. Some examples of primary sources are speeches, laws, and court documents, diaries, memoirs, autobiographies, and letters, works of art, novels, and plays, documented observations, interviews, original research, and data, and historical newspapers. So how can primary sources be used for research? They can be used as a focal point of a discussion about events. They can be used to back up claims or criticisms. They can be used as evidence for theories and research. And they can be used to gain historical perspectives on a topic. So what are secondary sources? Secondary sources are written by scholars or observers after the fact and interpret or analyze primary sources or events. These sources are at least one step removed from what they are describing. Some examples of secondary sources are textbooks, encyclopedias, essays, and reviews, magazine or journal articles which analyze events or ideas, and books which provide a summary of events or synthesize information from many primary sources. So how are secondary sources used? They can be used to get background information and understand the scope of a topic. They can be used to see what others have discussed or get opinions. You can use them to learn how recent events affect or fit into the larger picture. And they can help you understand the significance of events, data, works of literature, and art. Let's look at an example. A primary source for a paper about the placebo effect could be data from a medical trial which was published in an academic journal. Secondary sources for this topic could include books about medication, the placebo effect, and health in general, or websites which define various anxiety disorders. One thing to keep in mind is that a source's classification as either primary or secondary can change depending on the topic that you're studying. For example, if you are writing about how the news is being represented on the internet, a news site like CNN might be considered a primary source. If you're studying news on the internet, CNN.com represents that. However, if you're writing about the article will be considered a secondary source. Since in this case you're studying the elections, an article on CNN.com is one step removed from your topic. For an effective research paper, try to use both primary sources, sources that are an original source of data, historical information, or creative works, as well as secondary sources, sources which summarize, analyze, or comment on ideas or events. Okay, so we're just going to go over what primary sources are again in case you missed it during the
the video. They are diaries, interviews, letters, raw data, official documents, court records and transcripts, photographs, journal articles that report the findings of original research, newspaper articles on current events, autobiographies, speeches, and works such as plays, poems, music, and art. And then this list for secondary sources is a little bit shorter, so it's easier to remember. They're history textbooks, encyclopedias, biographies, reference books, nonfiction history books, editorials, and journal articles. So we're going to do an activity, and I have little slips of paper. And on each little slip of paper, there's an example of a primary and secondary source, and you guys are going to determine whether they're primary or secondary. Everybody needs to take one, and you're going to read aloud what the slip says, and then you're going to say what kind of source you think it is. Okay, while we're finishing, we'll pass them out. We can start over here with Carrie.
The Diary of Anne Frank, which provides a first-hand account of life as a Jew in hiding during the Holocaust. It would be a primary source.
That's correct. Go ahead, Mr.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. And that would be a primary.
Mine's Military Strategies of World War II. That's nonfiction, so that's secondary.
Barbara Walters' 2001 interview with George W. Bush regarding his impending inauguration. That would be a primary source.
Encyclopedia Britannica. The Lincoln's December 26, 1864 letter to General Sherman congratulating him on his military capture of Savannah several days before. Primary?
Yes.
An article in the Honolulu Star Bulletin describing a multi-car crash on H1 that happened the day before. Secondary.
No, that would actually be primary because it's reporting on current events. So that's a good guess.
Article in the Harvard Medical Journal, secondary?
Yes.
Modern or World History, a textbook, is secondary.
Transcripts of testimony given before Judge David Ezra regarding the impact on Longhorn fisheries on Hawaii's population of endangered turtles.
Yes.
Diana, Princess of Wales, is a biography.
You guys did a really good job with identifying the different types of sources. If you guys want to go ahead and fill in a few things of what you've learned on your KWL chart. Does anybody want to share what they learned, something that they learned? Shane?
Just the different types that there are, primary and secondary, like encyclopedias is secondary.
Right. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to, you guys need to bring in one of your sources that you have, a secondary source that has a list of a bibliography in the back. We're going to use it, and we're going to use the bibliography to find different primary sources to help strengthen your arguments, because a lot of times they'll have them listed, so then it already does the work for you. You just have to track down the article or the journal or the book. And for homework tonight, you guys can just go ahead and write on your conversation calendar something that you're confused about or what you're worried about your paper. See you tomorrow.